BYD cars are going boom in Mexico in more ways than one. We're approaching 500 subscribers, so please help us get there. Let's uncover a shocking truth. The Chinese electric cars from BYD flooding Mexico and the rest of Latin America hide a deadly danger in their batteries and lies within their finances. From ship explosions to investigations exposing lies about their technology, BYD and the Chinese Communist Party are putting people at risk. So why has the current Mexican government opened the doors so freely? Several Chinese brands of electric vehicles have flooded the Mexican and Latin American market in the past few years, promising a cheaper, cleaner alternative of cars that look as good or better than those from conventional brands, many making very thin attempts to just copy designs of luxury cars. Let's take BYD, or Build Your Dreams, the largest car manufacturer in the world, as an example. The Chinese electric vehicle giant has taken Mexico by storm. Since 2023, it has opened over 50 dealerships offering models like the Seagull or Dolphin for just $7,700, far cheaper than competitors. Its success stems from massive Chinese government subsidies, including $2.1 billion in 2022. And it has been recently exposed in a report that BYD has also kept itself afloat through debt, cost-cutting, and not so much from concrete sales. This allows BYD to sell at unbeatable prices and leverage the USMCA to export to Latin America, and eventually the US, which they continue to state is in their plans, as crazy as that sounds. But there's a hidden cost that many who have bought into the lies are trying to ignore. Safety. And unfortunately, it's an issue that a lot of not just customers, but also people that work at the dealerships themselves don't even know about. The current party in power, Morena, here in Mexico, that has also been in power for the last 6 years with AMLO, or Andrés Manuel López Obrador, has allowed this expansion without strict regulations, ignoring the risks of BYDs and other cheap Chinese EV batteries. As Mexico becomes a springboard for China, consumers face real dangers, and there's a lot being done to silence both information and critics. While I don't fault those that were attracted by a cheaper alternative and visually impressive technology, the fault squarely lies within the manufacturers and the governments that have obscured the truth and sold lies. BYD boasts that its Blade battery, used in models like the Han and the Dolphin, or Seagull because they changed the name, is among the safest in the world, even supplied to Tesla and Toyota vehicles like the Tesla Model Y. But independent research tells a different story. In 2021, the Beijing Institute of Technology noted that BYD uses cheaper materials in some batteries to cut costs, compromising thermal stability. In plain language, compromised thermal stability means that the battery could explode if it overheats. However, the main worry is that the Blade battery was designed making it different to others used in commercial electric vehicles. While I'm no expert in electric vehicles, there have been several reports exploring BYD's battery issues that have found the following. The reality is that the new structural innovation that BYD has touted in its Blade batteries and said that they're the safest out there is nothing but an attempt to reduce costs by about 30%. This optimization also comes with a big drawback: not being able to be repaired. And of course, these kinds of issues are not advertised right before people buy the car. Once a cell within the battery swells, caused from gas buildup and chemical reactions, or malfunctions, it cannot be replaced, making the entire battery not only useless but dangerous. Regular EV batteries are comprised of individual cells placed next to each other inside a small box called a module, and then these small boxes are housed within a larger metal box called the battery pack. BYD decided to make better use of space and efficiency with these lithium iron phosphate Blade batteries by removing the small boxes or modules and making the battery longer and thinner with more cells tightly packed within the battery pack. And not only that, but they glued the cells together, making it impossible to replace the individual cells, compromising the entire battery. And because the cells are so tightly packed, when heat is inevitably generated through the use of the battery, the middle cells suffer from poor heat dissipation, where heat cannot easily escape, instead increasing the risk of a chemical reaction where gas is produced and the cells swell and bulge. This makes the temperature of the cells next to it also rise and increase the risk of fire or explosion. And while it might not be as easy to imagine this happening within a giant battery inside a car, maybe you've had a very old cell phone where you start to notice that the battery starts to swell and bulge. Just imagine that, but in a larger, more dangerous scale. And these blade batteries also have a calibration issue. They run on a battery management system, or BMS, that is not calibrated properly for the structural changes made by BYD. It has been reported that the BMS has trouble with properly indicating the charge and range levels, sometimes indicating more than 50% charge when in reality they had less than 20, and then plummeting, leaving drivers stranded before being able to recharge, all due to the difficulty the BMS has in calibrating and reading these oddly structured batteries. When the owner runs into any of these issues, the entire battery must be replaced, making money saved on a cheap Chinese EV meaningless once the customer ends up shelling the same or more on repairs at the dealership that come hidden within a car made by a manufacturer whose main objective is cost-cutting and cutting corners. A replacement battery can often cost as much or more than the car itself. BYD has been hiding risks of the cars in places that customers cannot really see during just the test drive. This explains numerous fires in China between 2020 and 2022. At least 11 BYD vehicles caught fire, according to local media and posts on their social media. In May 2024, a BYD dealership in Fuzhou, China, I hope that's how you say it, burned down, the 10th such incident since 2021. BYD has spent both time and money hiding these incidents and potential risks both from international media and within their internal documents and financial reports that go to investors. A chilling case occurred in 2023 when a cargo ship carrying BYD vehicles to Mexico exploded in the middle of the ocean. While BYD didn't confirm its cars were the cause, experts suggest that poorly handled lithium batteries can ignite during transport. And then again recently, this year on June 4th, another vessel called Morning Midas also caught fire while transporting about 3,000 cars, 800 of them EVs, from China to Mexico's port Lázaro Cárdenas in Michoacán, with some of the cars on board being identified as EVs from Chery and GWM, Great Wall Motors, both Chinese brands. In China, 7 electric car fires are reported daily, many linked to BYD. These cars continue to populate the streets of Mexico, and the infrastructure for them is not even properly handled within a lot of Mexican cities. There's only about 3,000 public stations, which increases the risk of overheating and exploding. Other Chinese brands like Li Auto, XPeng, NIO have faced similar issues. Between 2020 and 2022, Li Auto reported 5 fires, XPeng 4, and NIA 1. A tragic case involved an AITO M5 in Mongolia, China, which caught fire in the store, causing 2 endings by suffocation. In Mexico, where quality controls are already lax, these vehicles pose a growing danger. The lack of regulation allows low-quality batteries into our streets, endangering drivers and pedestrians. Posts on X have highlighted quality control issues in China and with Chinese products, including batteries that overheat and explode. This isn't just a technical problem, it's a public safety threat that the current government isn't addressing. The introduction of these cars to Mexican roads happened relatively recently, but as years pass, the problems are bound to start showing sooner rather than later. And BYD isn't acting alone. It's an arm of the Chinese Communist Party. China controls about 57% of global battery production, with BYD and CATL, or CATL, dominating the market. In Mexico, BYD plans to build a factory controlling everything from battery production to logistics, creating technological and economic dependence. The Chinese government has poured billions into BYD, enabling it to flood markets with low prices while consolidating geopolitical influence. However, one of the most talked about investors into BYD, other than the CCP, has been Warren Buffett, with his Berkshire Hathaway acquiring a stake of up to 20% starting all the way back in 2008. And yet, since August 2022, they have slashed their investment to less than 5%, meaning that further sales will not be publicly disclosed in Hong Kong, so it's even unknown how much of their stake they actually sold off. And still, Mexican dealerships and puff pieces about BYD continue to use this as a talking point. And even for people that think they're completely safe over in the US, where there's no real investment from BYD and they know they can't really enter the market, Tesla has started to partner quite frequently with BYD and using their technology of blade batteries to lower the costs of their cars as well, same with Toyota. Mexico's current ruling party has been permissive, ignoring risks while handing over strategic sectors to China, including the construction of 2 new shipping ports. While the US imposes 100% tariffs on Chinese cars and 25% on their batteries, or so they say, Mexico demands no rigorous safety tests. In October of 2024, Mexico finally ended the 0% tariff strategy for any electric vehicle imported into the country, all in the name of emission reduction, by reinstating the 15 to 20% tariff on foreign-built and assembled cars. Similar to Russia, who let the Chinese electric vehicles take over the market after Western sanctions started during the war with Ukraine, and now sees an influx of cheaply made Chinese cars as a threat to local production, imposing now protectionist measures starting this year. And other countries are slowly starting to realize what the effects of just letting any imports in has on their local economy. An additional tariff increase of 70% has been proposed by some Mexican legislators, given that new figures have emerged that show that from January to April of 2025 of this year, 19.1% of all cars sold in Mexico were made in China, with 90,227 units being sold. How do we stop this looming issue? First, Mexico must mandate rigorous tests for all electric vehicle batteries and electric vehicles following international standards. This is easier said than done, or if they'll even care. But second, Latin America must realize that we are quickly becoming China's dumping ground for cars that not even their own people want, many of which have been sitting unsold and unused, exposed to the elements due to lack of storage, creating a giant safety risk for anyone on the road that ends up buying these. Third, the government must limit Chinese investment in strategic sectors, allowing car production and manufacturing, making it friendly for and new policies for Mexico now that the US is looking to nearshore and move production away from China and Asia and capitalize on the opportunity. The problem extends far beyond just Mexico, with China's electric vehicle companies betting on the whole Latin American market to offload their cars and the cars that their own people apparently no longer want, exploit a market desperate for cheaper ways of moving around, and the goals that governments have imposed on themselves of reducing emissions. BYD's explosive batteries and China's invasion are a risk that Mexico and other countries cannot ignore, no matter how shiny and cheap the initial offer seems. It'll end up costing much more in the end, not just money, but maybe even lives. If you got all the way to the end, we're about to reach 500 subscribers, so before you go, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the video if you found it interesting or important. Thank you. And that's why BYD cars are going boom in more ways than one.